it's Stephen Shore who first coined the expression, if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. He coined that, and it's true. And so someone with autism with sensory issues might show up in the world in a way where they cannot tolerate loud sounds, or there's certain textures that they cannot handle eating. From a neurotypical perspective, they might show up in the world as anxious or a picky eater. From a neurodevelopmentally, like a neurodiversity paradigm perspective, they simply have sensory issues and they have to protect themselves in order to function. The medical model discusses or identifies disordered behaviors and symptoms, looks at autism as a disorder and a deviation from normal, right? And the social model, society creates an environment that doesn't support a person with a disability. And the neurodiversity paradigm says there is no normal. No two brains are alike. There is no mind that is better or worse than another mind. And the neurodiversity paradigm says that neurodiversity confers a competitive advantage to our species. So it challenges the medical and social models in terms of saying, who defines what's normal? When we say disorder, that is from a medical model, and many really find that to be pathologizing. When we use the terminology difference or disability, many people with autism and in the autistic community and researchers and whatnot find that to be more descriptive. And whereas disorder is more pathologizing and kind of feeds into an ableist attitude about people with autism. It's a really delicate question about, I want to be, for autistic people, I don't want to always be masking or pretending I'm somebody I'm not. And yet I want these things. I want to have a job. I want to live independently. I want to have friends, and I want to be who I am. And so I do a lot of normalizing. There's a lot of different ways that people exist differently in the world. There are also people with physical disabilities. There are people with, mental health issues like anxiety or depression, there's a host of things. If you know that you have some goals or some values that you hold close to you and that you really want to see those things happen in your life, then you have to look at, well, I live in this bigger world where it's a complicated one. It's not just neurodivergence that isn't appreciated. A lot of other cultures are also not appreciated. So what are some things I need to understand about that world? And where can I try to learn how to be more flexible? And where do I maybe not have to worry about that so much? So I can navigate, so I can get what I want. The number one answer to that is name it. So as a clinician, first, we have to educate ourselves. What is ableism? When am I able? I grew up in an ableist society and family. So of course I have those aspects. So we look at ourselves first as clinicians. What is ableism? How does that show up in me? How does it show up in my own relationships and in my own encounters? Then we look at our client once we've done our own work, and we observe. We say, is there internalized ableism? Is there ableism in their systems? Of course there is, and they're definitely in the educational systems and work systems. If we notice that they're saying things like, I don't want to do those things with those people, that they're separating themselves from the people who might have something really in common with them, then we know there's some kind of internalized ableism. So we name it. We say, you know what ableism is? Let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation. So very gently and very gradually, we engage them using psychoeducation on what that is, what it looks like. And many times when I've done this with clients, they're relieved. They're like, they never thought of it. And so there's a little bit of relief in that. Sometimes there's resistance, and then, you have to pace yourself with where your client is. One of the main goals of treatment, if you're working from the neurodiversity paradigm, is, as a clinician, is what's your role in helping to change the environment? So that could mean, if you're working with a client who's in a school system that is not very accommodating, to provide some advocacy or help the client get access to advocacy so that they're not alone in advocating for themselves to get their needs met in that environment. So that's one of the main treatment goals. Understanding that each autistic person, just like each client, has their own pace and their own process. So if they desire to connect with other people to help them gain access to those resources out there, to help them gain people who are accepting, who are going to be socially accepting of who they are. That's another goal of treatment. And a really important goal of treatment is a lot of times what co-occurs with autism. Autism is not a mental health disability. It is a neurodevelopmental disability and difference. But mental health co-occurrences tend to be anxiety, depression, social anxiety, OCD, sometimes bipolar disorder. And so as a clinician, really assessing for that, which kind of gets into differential diagnosis and all of that, but really assessing for what are the mental health issues and looking at trauma, family of origin trauma, relational trauma, multi-generational trauma, and how that intersects with the neurodivergence.